Hello guys, what's going on? I have just finished watching Adolescence episode 2. So before we get into it a bit more, if you've not seen my review or, thoughts on episode 1, I'll link it in the description below. But basically this show is really heavy. I'll keep it briefer than I did last time, but it's about misogynistic child on child murder. So, a young boy who is 13, who has basically been indoctrinated into the incel social media cult, attacks and kills a young woman, a 13-year-old girl, or 14-year-old girl. And the show is about the aftermath of that. So, yeah, this channel, as I keep saying, I'm new to it here. It's supposed to be a nice blend of things. It's supposed to be quite funny. It's supposed to be, quite humorous content. I can't do that for this series. If you saw episode 1, or if you listen to episode 1, or if you've seen any of the series yourself, you'll know that it's just not a laughing matter at all. It's very serious. It's a very serious show, and it tackles some very serious topics. However, I do also think it's quite important to talk about serious things and touch on serious subjects and stuff like that. So we'll get into it. I'm sorry if I it just leaves you completely floored. Stupefied is a word that I'd use. Leaves you stunned. But I will do my best to talk about it in some sort of meaningful way. The first thing that I want to touch upon is straight away, is going into the second episode, is that there is some fantastic acting performances. Now, the main sergeant, not the main sergeant, the secondary sergeant, Faye Marseille, D.S. Misha Frank. So, I said in the first episode that her acting was, shall we say, a little bit nervous and a little bit, maybe not quite for the role. And I still stand by that. I still stand by it. But she was a lot better in episode 2. She still had moments where I did think the same as episode 1, where some lines seemed a bit forced and she seemed a bit nervy and things like that. But like I say, you hate to be too critical, but you just have to call it out as it is. However, like I say, it was a better acting performance than in episode 1 from her. And the other thing is, I would say pretty much every performance in episode 2 was good, was fantastic even, and that's quite an impressive feat when you think how many children or young people are acting in this. So to give a brief synopsis of episode 2, it sees the 2 lead detectives from episode 1 go and visit Jamie's high school, and they're trying to establish some facts, find a murder weapon, and just try and see what happened. So the weapon that was used to kill Katie still hasn't been found. So they're approaching the school to try and, inform the kids, and also just try and see if anyone has any information that might be forthcoming regarding the murder, and urging them to step forward to provide the information. And that's basically the backbone of episode 2. In all seriousness, that's about what it is. That is the whole point of episode 2, is that. So the first thing that strikes me with that is, yeah, like I say, the acting performances are fantastic. Now, as you can imagine, in this episode, you do have a lot of, young adults, children, adolescents, if you will, high schoolers, teenagers, and that can be a tall role to fill, because, you're compounding complex issues here. You've got the fact that, just by the very nature, their age alone, some of these actors will be inexperienced. The second thing is, I have read and heard, and it's something that I've not validated myself because I'm not a member of cast and crew and I've not looked into it too deep because I want to avoid spoilers, but I have heard that the director and the people who were in charge of casting were looking for people who hadn't had big acting careers, especially the younger people. So to have pulled out some star people like this to bring out some big performances it's insane. And I can rattle off multiple people. The standout for me has to be Fatima Bojang as Jade, who is Katie's best friend. She was incredible. Her mannerisms, the way she spoke to the police, the way she handled the situation. There's a fight scene between her and another boy, a friend of Jamie's. The whole thing was just incredible. Her whole performance stand out. But one of the standout performances of the entire series, second maybe to only to Jamie himself, with it being his first acting role, but honest to God, incredible stuff from her. A standout mention also has to go to the lead inspector's son, Adam, who is played by Amari Bacchus. Now, I've just had to Google that, but he was incredible. And, as I mentioned last episode, we did touch upon that backstory a little bit more between the fractured relationship between the two of them. Yeah, so in the first episode, I did mention that I would like to see more between Luke and his son, because obviously in episode 1, it had hinted at that and hinted that there was some sort of, something wasn't quite, I wouldn't say broken, but it wasn't working well. Well, we do get to see a bit more of that, which is something that I hoped for in the second episode and something that I anticipated coming. And it gives us a chance to see that relationship, to see what the damage is, and to see them kind of attempt to heal that. There was even an opportunity for them to heal it at the end of the episode, and they go out and they go and grab some salt and pepper chips together, that sort of thing, and they have a little chat in the car. But his performance was very good. There is a conversation between him and Luke, his father, but in a more professional capacity, and I think it's delivered very well. In fact, that whole scene is something that I'll touch upon later, is a sound design. Not necessarily the soundtrack, but the sound design of this episode specifically was insane. They go into this quiet room to talk about basically, some background on incel and Andrew Tate-esque people, and they talk about that, which is good because we need frank discussion on that in media. I'm very happy to see it, but that for now, that's by the by. But in this scene, there's a piano class in the next room across, and you can hear the dun 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 of the piano, and then they close the doors, and you can still kind of hear it a bit, but it's muffled. The room's very tight, it's very closed, very claustrophobic. Which I feel is a running theme in the show so far. They're trying to create this sense of claustrophobia, tight camera angles. There's a lot of reactions, facial reactions, imprisonment vibe going on. But 100%. The acting performances from the young kids especially. Honourable mentions to Jamie's two friends as well, specifically Ryan, who's played by, I'm going to have to check, who's played by Kane Davis. So honourable mention to him. Very good performance. I don't know how true it is, but I've heard it off my partner, so it's second-hand information. But I heard he actually auditioned to be Jamie, but didn't get it. But they cast him in this supporting role instead. But boy, it must have been close because he is fantastic as well. So we're seeing a lot of great young character performances. Even minor, class clown-like characters. There's one character that I couldn't put him in more than year 7 or 8. He was a bit of a cheeky twat, to be honest. But he came in and he did his bit, and he delivered it well. And at times it wasn't funny, but you could see the high school humour element coming through. But to me, that actually showcased that more toxic environment that high schools have, especially for young men, and that toxic masculinity. And he performed it well. He did. The teachers had quite good acting. I didn't really like I think it was Mr. Malik, but I will check that again. Yeah, that's right, Mr. Malik. I didn't think he had the strongest performance, and really he had a real moment to shine, and it just came across as well as acting. It stood out a little bit to me. And now, look, I'll be honest, it might be that the bar had been set so high this episode with the acting. It may have been that. But yeah, for me, he was one of the only characters that didn't hit the mark for me. You know, but definitely enjoyed seeing Miss Fenimore, who took them around the school. She was a very good actor. And yeah, just overall, just a stunning set of performances from everyone involved. This episode definitely had more mystery and intrigue. There was a sense that people knew something was going on, or knew more than they were letting on, especially from the kids' side of things. And, you know, it kind of transpires that is true with the whole picking on him thing. But even from the teachers now, I'm not sure whether it's from, and I'll admit this, honesty is a best policy, is it not? I'm not sure if the teachers were like acting a bit weird because they expected this sort of behaviour from Jamie and they just didn't want to believe it was coming. And they're shocked it's happened, but they feel shit, like we should have caught on to this. But I did kind of get that vibe a little bit. But it could just be that they're reeling from the shock of it a little bit. Everyone's adjusting a bit. You know, it's a weird environment in the aftermath of a child murder. You know, it's a grim, violent thing. Like, I get it, but I felt there was something odd there. In any case, it definitely generated more mystery. You know, in all honesty, in episode 1, you always knew, in my opinion anyway, you always knew Jamie had done it. And then, you know, at the end of the episode, they showed you the CCTV footage, and then, you know, it's crystal clear. You knew he'd done it. I figured he'd done it but some people try to fucking defend the guy. I don't know. That's crazy. But that's by the by. That's for a different video if I ever get round to doing it. But yeah, there's definitely that whole environment of, you know, there is like a little bit more. You know, there is, like, if anyone knows about the murder web and they're trying to keep the cards close to the chest, you know, nobody wants to, you know, be a snitch or say that Katie was kind of picking on him a little bit, because then it'll turn into victim blaming, which it kind of did. Luke, the DI Luke, he was the one who said, oh, so it's bullying after his son informed him. It's not really, though, is it? It's unkind behaviour, perhaps, yeah, you know, maybe a bit of a picking on and a taking the mickey, but it doesn't mean he should go and stab her 7-8 times. But, you know, yeah. But there is definitely more mystery in this episode. There's a sort of, the way I'd sum it up is that there's almost an uncanny valley vibe, where they're just trying to, like, everything just seems a bit off, like they're trying to hide something at the school. And again, you can equate that to it being, you know, to do with the murder and everyone's just reeling from shock, but it still creates that atmosphere, this tense atmosphere. And to be honest, in terms of the show, I love that. I love that. It was a very bold decision to take it the way they did, at the school specifically. And I think it paid off. I completely think it paid off. But the other thing is, it's a bit more subtle as well, you know, and this show is trying to, not just in the fictional universe, it's trying to expose misogyny in general. They know social media are going to be talking about this. They knew it before it was released. They knew there was going to be a bit of a hype around this. It's a big show, and they're trying to expose or almost the ingrained misogyny that people have. Like, they make sly little digs at Andrew Tate. There's even a part where the secondary inspector, she even says about all everyone's going to remember about is Jamie. Nobody's going to be remembering Katie. They're not going to be remembering the victim. They're just going to know about this murder and all this shit. And she's right. But you then go online, and I've seen these firsthand, comments off of people defending Jamie and calling Katie a bully, or even going as far as to call her a bitch or a cow. It's a fucking 14-year-old girl who's been stabbed to death by a 13-year-old boy because she basically didn't go out with him. It's appalling. It's appalling, but it does it with a subtlety. It's not so on the nose that, I don't know how you can miss it, but it's not so on the nose that these people with ingrained misogyny, they can pick up on it. And it's quite scary, but this is what links back to what I said about episode 1, where I said this episode is quite educational. It just is. You're showing people that their behaviours are incorrect. You're showing people that they're being misogynistic and that they're being sexist, and you're not pulling the punches. Andrew Tate is mentioned by name, again, something that I have said is good, and it needs to be done, and we need more discourse about how horrible humans like him are and what damage men like him are doing to society at large, so that's good. But it also has the subtle things about masculinity, something that one of the few jokes that I can make is that if D.I. Luke's shirt got any tighter, it's going to fucking rip off him at the arms and his buttons are going to pop off. The shirt does not fit. Now that's a common theme in like these sort of gritty British crime dramas, and you see lead detectives and characters wearing really tight clothes, like defining their muscles and like, yeah. But then my partner pointed out to me, is that actually a deliberate thing from the show to showcase that masculinity and that sort of energy that exists? And you know what? Fuck me. I didn't clock it. But yeah, I think it is. She noticed that. And it's definitely worth talking about. It's just subtle things like that. I was guilty of missing that. But they pay attention to the wardrobe. Is that overt? Not really. There's more overt things like the mentioning of Andrew Tate and like with the people saying that it's bullying, like she almost deserved it, she had it coming. It's all that's being pointed out to us in the show and in the real world. And I can see that developing and growing more in the next 2 episodes potentially, where we see this exposing of misogynistic traits that tessellate to the real world. But, we'll have to wait and see for that. As I mentioned earlier, the sound design and the soundtrack are great. It's completely immersive. I mentioned the piano part in the scene for earlier on, but it's all in one shot. Don't forget, it's all in one shot. It's just that general feeling of, I grew up in the UK. I've been to British high school. Now, I've not been to high school for 12 years now, maybe more, 13 years, 12 years. I am an old man. But I felt like I was back in high school for that episode. The sound design was perfect. The muttering of the children, the teachers talking, the school bell ringing, the noises in the canteen. Just generally speaking, it sounded like a school. It sounded like how I remember school sounding. Maybe it was ramped up a little bit for the drama. I very rarely, if ever, saw a kid or heard a kid tell a teacher to fuck off and not get, brutally repercussed for it. But nevertheless, that's where we were with that. You kind of just have to take that with a pinch of salt because that's, it's a TV show. But the sound design summed it up. The soundtrack as well was very good, very tense. There's a chase scene where one of Jamie's friends, Ryan, who it transpires provided him with the murder weapon, and also got arrested. There is a scene where he attempts to flee and is being chased by D.I. Luke, and it's very video game-esque. It's like a video game because it's all in one shot in that point of view, because he's running and the camera's just following them, and it looks a bit slow. You can tell it's not a real chase. The main guy that D.I. Luke could have caught up to him very easily. He's running very slow, but it's a very well shot scene, and the soundtrack adds to that. Also, at the end, there's a choir song where the actor who was cast as Katie, Amelia Holiday, actually sings it in the choir of that song. She's barely in it because she's, unfortunately dead. She's been murdered. But there's a scene where she's singing in the choir and she has a little solo part as well. And it's whilst Jamie's dad is placing flowers at the murder site, and it's like a long drone shot that like comes down and lands, and it's just haunting. The choir, it almost brings a tear to the eye. I'm sure for some people it probably did, but that whole soundtrack thing and sound design, it kind of just links to another feature, which is that I found episode 2 was just paced a lot better. Overall, it was just a better episode for me anyway. That's not to say I didn't like episode 1. If you saw my review of it, I found it very powerful, found it very heavy, but episode 2 just had the pacing right. There was a lot of like, almost like mini episodes within it where they were like dealing with different classes, different people. Like I say, you had the Luke dealing with his son, and it turns out that his son had some information that was very prudent to the case about high school lingo and how high school works and social media. And I just found it to be the one shot scene didn't drag is the wrong word. Because like I say, if you watched episode 1, you'll know what I'm getting at, but it didn't take away from the episode, if that makes sense. It flowed a lot better. There was a lot better flow with it. Things, just went at a nice pace, and everything just stayed consistent in terms of speed and how it was going through. But now it's on to a criticism. The first half of this whole episode, it was kind of just all filler and no thriller. So they went around to certain classes. They were asking and appealing for the murder weapon, and you got the usual, oh, Jamie's a fucking murderer, or you got the shock, like, or the odd comment about Katie. You got a bit of abuse towards police or banter in the classroom, including a scene where a teacher outs one of the students as being the inspector's son, which I just don't understand why you do that. I'd go mad if I was a student in the class. I'd be like, I don't want people knowing that shit, especially when he stood right at the front of the class. Yeah, and it also, I'm not saying there wasn't anything of substance in that first bit. We saw Jade visibly upset by her friend's murder, but she was unable to provide any tangible information to help the case. But it did paint a picture. But yeah, it was mainly just going around the classrooms, going around that. So the first half of episode 2, nothing really happens. It did provide an interesting insight into Jamie and Katie's school and their relationship and how they're perceived, both of them individually and together. And it kind of gave a good little sum up of modern British high school in general, for Americans who are watching, or for people like me who haven't been to school for a while, and things have changed and we're getting a bit of a taste of it. But generally speaking, there wasn't a lot that actually went down in episode 2 in the first half, really, including when Jamie's two friends are talking quietly together, where we could have got a lot of information from that. We got a little bit of information there. You get a sense you know about the murder weapon, but nothing is really forthcoming. And it feels like, if I'm honest, I don't want to be an arse here, but it feels like it could have been a lot shorter. That whole sequence could have been a lot shorter. The fight scene was quite impressive, which is where Jade accuses Ryan of being complicit in the murder, punches him up in school, and she gets obviously in trouble for that, because she just punched him up in school, and he hits his head, and like there's questioning of him, Ryan, personal questioning. You don't really want to answer the questions. It's all very tense, and that's about the area where the story starts to turn, but it all comes back to that mystery and intrigue. But overall, it just doesn't need to be that long. Even to showcase those elements that I've said it does showcase, it just don't need to be that long. I was right though. We were introduced to Adam, the officer's son, and we got a bit more background on him. And, that's quite funny because I was hoping for that and I anticipated that. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more in the episode, especially considering my previous point about it being a bit all filler. They could have definitely dedicated a little bit more time to that relationship and provided us a little bit more background. And you know what, like, a big point of the show for me that I'm picking up on is that they're not showing a lot about Katie or the motives for why Jamie's done it, because the point of the show is kind of, number one, the motive doesn't really matter. The motive, he did it, and that's all that matters now, is that it's done. He's done it, and the why doesn't matter as much as the holy fuck, like, this could have been prevented, if that makes sense. You know, the why does become apparent. To me anyway, it's beginning to become apparent now. I've not seen episode 3 or 4 yet. It's beginning to become apparent to me that it's sort of to do with a bit of everything. But I'll stop that because I want to talk about that a bit more later on, when I have a better idea that what I'm saying is correct, or, you know, if I'm not correct, then so be it. And then number 2 is they're not showing a lot of Katie's side and that other point of view. And the reason they're not showing a lot of Katie is, number 1, I think they want to show it a lot from this other side and get a lot of exposure. These are the real ramifications for if you do something fucking hanging like this, that sort of thing. But also because they're exposing that misogyny. It's exactly what D.I. Misha said, is that, you know, everybody forgets Katie. Everybody remembers Jamie. Nobody remembers Katie. You know, it's that. But to not develop that relationship with his son more, but tease at it, that's not deliberate. It seems a bit lackluster to me. They could have definitely done better with that. They could have he didn't even really have a frank discussion with his son about the behaviour of other young men in his school. Like, to me, that would have created quite a tense and nice moment, and it could have, you know, they could have battled out their own personal things, but they chose not to do that. But I was right. We got a bit more on D.I. Luke's background and that situation. You know, at one point he said he don't feel like he's a right dad, like he doesn't fit his son well and stuff like that. But like I say, the other thing is, you know, just harking back to it to sum up, some of it did feel a bit like a video game. The fight scene, the chase scene, it had that sort of element to it. And I want to champion more shows like I filmed in one shot, one scene, one long shot. It's cool, man. It is cool. And it's an unflinching look at it. But by the nature of it, it's an unflinching look because you can't look away because it's one scene. And it's an unflinching look at the case, at the murder, at society, at culture, and how we all have this responsibility. You know, in episode 1, we went to the police station, and the police have a responsibility, and Jamie's parents have a responsibility. Now we're at the point where, okay, you know, the students, the teachers, and the faculty, they all have a responsibility, and then on a wider scale, the council, the government. Do you know what I mean? And it's not holding anything back. And again, you know, to go back to it, the way it's shot is fantastic. And I would like to see more of that sort of stuff. One-shot shows, very tense. Especially in a show like this that is so tense. You know, like I say, it felt like a video game at times. You only get that with the tension that's been built. And you feel like a fly on a wall and you're going around. Flabbergasted is another word I'd use. You finish an episode, and in my opinion, I couldn't really binge it. I had to, you know, take some time to just digest and process. It's completely unflinching, but yeah, it's nice to see it gets a closer look at the social media influence on the children, and it kind of opens up a path to explore that both in the show and in discourse online with people reacting to the show. Like I mentioned last time that there could potentially be some government legislation coming in about educating men, young men at schools on this sort of thing, and to me that's incredible and necessary. But it's opening that avenue to talk about something that previously and still now is taboo. But we'll have to see how that goes. They name dropped Andrew Tate. I think that was the only person they name dropped, but they did. It's good to see it. It's good to see that he's getting a bit of flack. Do you know what I mean? And again, it links back to that the parents, the teachers, the culture, the society. We all have a responsibility to raise children properly. I recently saw an interview with Stephen Graham, the creator, who said, he's not blaming anybody for Jamie's actions, but he's saying we all have a responsibility for Jamie's actions. Because in this day and age where the internet is rampant and you can't just stop your kids going on the internet, and you can't, stop what your kids are hearing and seeing at school, and you can't stop you can't stop and always know what your kids are doing when they go out for the afternoon. Everybody is responsible. As a parent, yes, you are responsible. We shouldn't forget that. Parents are responsible, but so are teachers, so are peers, so are content creators. Everybody is responsible. Yeah, it's just nice to see he got name dropped for the fucking scum that he is. But it also just, it's good to see it. It's good to see it. But they're my thoughts on episode 2. Heavy stuff. What am I expecting from the next episode? I don't know. I've heard the next episode is the biggest episode. It's the best episode. That's just what I've heard. But I don't know what direction it's going to go in. I'm hoping to see more of Jamie's family and how they're dealing with things. Maybe looking at what the lawyers say and what their thinking is. I wouldn't mind, in a not so macabre way, seeing the footage of the murder again, confirming it's Jamie. Maybe his mum sees the footage, what she thinks of it, maybe how the police react to the situation now they've got a bit more insight and a bit, do they find the murder weapon? What does Ryan say? I don't know. But so far for episode 2, I'm going to give it a 4. I think I give episode 1 a 4. I can't even remember if I give it a rating, but episode 2 is a 4. I'm very close to a 5. It just for the first half being a bit not, just seeing how it wasn't as in depth, it just kind of dampened it a bit for me. I am looking forward to seeing how the rest of the show goes, and that's it for this one. So thanks for watching.